when you think of the word darkness, if you take the title, we kind of talked about some. What are some of the meanings of darkness?
Absence of light.
Right. Right. Just physically. What else? Ignorance is darkness. Yeah.
Fat man.
What's that?
Fat man.
He is darkness.
Oh, Batman.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Yeah,
fat man.
Fat
What?
Any other things for darkness? You mentioned ignorance and lack of light.
What?
Yeah.
Malicious.
You say malicious?
Evil.
So evil? Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say that.
Yeah, those are some of the things. And so the name of the book, it's about darkness, but it's not just about darkness, it's about the heart of darkness. So you take the same line of questioning, what does heart mean?
The center.
The center? What else?
The meaning.
All right. Anything else?
The essence of.
All right.
What else, Glenn?
Yeah.
Your physical heart.
Say that again?
Your physical heart.
Yeah, the physical heart plus the center of affections and will. So this book isn't just about darkness, it's about like the core of it, all those things that Clay just mentioned. You don't have to answer or write these down, but I always think it's important, anything you can know about an author, it can't hurt. Like the ones we did just the other day, you know, William Blake, William Blake, and the next one was Wordsworth, we still have to do that. Knowing that they're romantic, that's a treasure of information right there about the poets. You know what to expect. And so, knowing Conrad, I don't know how much it is, but he is a man of the sea. He was actually born in Poland.
He is.
So he's that guy that always interests me, because, and we can answer these, we can answer them right now. He was born in Poland, and he became a sailor and worked his way up in terms from just a regular seaman on the ship to a skipper. So he was actually a captain of the ship. And eventually he becomes citizen of the United States, of Great Britain, of England. So to me that's fascinating. Some of the greatest, one of the greatest writers you'll find out of the 20th century in English was not a native born Englishman, or didn't even speak it. And we'll get to some of the works and everything, but the stories were about the sea. And again, I don't know why, I'm fascinated by books about, I remember high school, I did a research paper on Moby Dick, on Herman Melville. I think in college I chose to do a on Joseph Conrad. And I've never been on a boat at all in the ocean, never. I bet you have. And so, but maybe that's why I'm fascinated with it, because I've never done it. But I've read lots of books about the sea. Yeah, we'll talk about the difference. This is a frame story, that's maybe useful. He uses lots of contrast. So, some little background, he was born in Poland. I don't know how this affects him, his father. Now we're talking about the 1850s. And I'm thinking of the Soviets and the communists and everything. No, this was the Tsar. This was the Tsar. That was a long time before the Russian Revolution. And so there was already unrest in Russia and its close countries. He began to be a sailor at age 16. He became fluent in English at 21. Yeah.
Why does it say to Russia? Is that just how you say that, or is that typo?
Well, that means he's Polish, but that he was exiled. That's where he went to be exiled from Poland. Now, Poland must have been under the influence of Russia even in this time. But that's a really interesting story. The Poles, I always feel sorry for them because you know, they had this trouble with the Russians, and they had the Nazi issues, and then for about 70 years, or after World War II, they were under the influence of the communists. So anyway, that's just, to me, that's trying to find their identity. It would be hard for them. He was orphaned, we mentioned that, and he became a British citizen, 1886.
Joseph Theodore Conrad, is that his father or is that?
Yeah, yeah, that is his name, Joseph
Oh,
Conrad's name.
That's his name.
Yeah. I remember growing up in the 50s and early 60s, lots of immigrants from Europe before and during World War II. The name Smith probably came from the name Schmidt. You know, people would change their names from a Russian or a European sounding, rather than keep it, which is what people do now, of course. They don't want to change their name to make it more American, but people would do that. They would make their name more American to fit in. They were just willing to do that. Now, that's not necessary now, because we're more of a, we understand that. That doesn't typecast. It's also interesting that before World War II, there were like in the hundreds of Hitlers on the New York City phone book. And after World War II, there were none. And what a legacy that is. I mean, he had ancestors. Now, he didn't have children. I don't think he had brothers about Hitler. But can you imagine that is your legacy? That no one even wants to be associated with your name. As opposed to in America, for instance, Washington, people were named streets, and that's changing a little bit, but that's just I think that's something that reminds me about the legacy, even at Caldwell. What's your legacy going to be here? What people think of when you're gone from here? He is one of the greatest novelists. Remember, poets are always held in higher esteem than novelists, because prose is more special than prose, and poetry is better by scholars' understanding than fiction. And so, though he's one of the greatest novelists in England, that only goes back, a novel only goes back to the 1700s, as opposed to, poetry's been around from the beginning. The Bible, it seems like half the Bible sometimes is written in poetry. But the novel itself is very new, relatively new. So he started at 16, and for 20 years, he served aboard ships and had to leave that career because of health, and became strictly a writer. Again, I just always had this false image of what do you, if you want to be a writer, what do you do? Well, you quit your real job, you go to New York City, you live in a small hotel room, and you sleep all day, and you go out all night to bars and places, and you experience life. That was sort of the 20th century picture. When you look at the long history of literature, Chaucer was a bureaucrat. Shakespeare was a businessman. Dante was like a dozen different, he was a politician. Conrad is a sailor. Herman Melville was a sailor. It's probably rare, and it's certainly not recommended. Don't ever quit your day job if you want to be a writer. You got to make a living. If you want to write for the fun of it, and you've got something to say, and maybe if you're lucky, somebody will want to read it. But that's always been a myth, but I fell for it. I thought that's what a writer looks like. You get a job, and then if you have time, write on the side. So we are, Pat, you are past the Civil War. You're under what are you doing? You passed the Civil War, but what does she call this era?
Nation building.
All right, she does look at Europe. I remember this, because remember, we used to be together, all of of humanities. So I attended all those lectures, have probably notes on it. I know I have notes on all of them. In England, this is called the Victorian period. Until the current Elizabeth, Victoria was the longest reigning monarch. And I told you about Elizabeth, 69 years this spring. I turned 69. She became queen in 52. Mr. Feeney and I are like 6 months apart, both born in 1952. And nobody, nobody born from 1952 or later has ever known another queen or monarch. She's the only one.
His name is Ford, Maddox Ford.
That's his name, yeah. These are famous writers. I haven't read any Galsworth, but Henry James, Stephen Crane, you know that name, H.G. Wells. And Ford was a poet, but he may have been more than that. But I remember him as a poet. All right, so I always like you to know that there are other books out there other than the one that we get to read. That's part of my job, is to introduce you to the whole, excuse me, the whole canon of works. And so I know I've read, besides Heart of Darkness, Lord Jim, Typhoon, The Secret Share is a short story. I know I've read more, but I don't see the others on there. Lord Jim we read in AP Lit 50 years ago. I liked it. I think that was Conrad I did in senior year, and then it was Melville I did in college. So I just write down at least a couple of these to know he did more than just the one book.
Are any of those equally famous or no?
Lord Jim is. That was considered, I always thought, since it was the one book I'd read by him, I always thought that was like his magnus opus. I don't know why. I guess Heart of Darkness has become that. There's some others. I know I've read Baby Typhoon. Just a note. If you do not like this book because it's just so dense and complicated, don't completely think that about the author. It's the only book, this style was not his typical style. We'll talk about why he chose that style. It is called The Heart of Darkness, and we did say darkness had to do with understanding and ignorance. And I think the book is on purpose dense and complex in order to make us get that feeling of, I don't understand what's going on, and that's how you feel when you're in darkness. You're feeling your way along, but it's definitely unique in terms of all the books that he wrote. Yeah.
Do you think he understood what was going on?
Yes, he's admitted that, and you'll see a couple of quotes I think up here. To me, it's a real fine line. You know all these big words, and you want to use them. You write well. You want to get better at it, but you write well. But you still have to communicate. So you don't want to speak down to your audience. You don't want to do that, but you don't want to purposely try to confuse them. So and that goes with your essays. I've got to understand your point, and that's where writing clearly it comes in. I mean, we've got to understand your point, but you can at least make it. You can challenge me with your ideas, and he's doing that here in this book. All right, it's actually based on a true story. He went up the Congo River as captain of a steamboat in 1889, and it ruined his health. That's the ultimate. He got malaria, probably it was, I don't know for sure, but he was never the same. Had to quit the business. And these are what I was telling you earlier about this particular book. it's hard to understand. I like the words obscure, you know, it's obscured, it's not clear, and it's elusive. You feel like you get it. One of the interesting things he does, like he spends like 2 or 3 chapters on fixing his steamboat. And that's really important to the plot of the story, because he needs to fix it so he can go get somebody. That's why he's in Africa. All of a sudden, almost mid-sentence, he's on his way to get, you know, it's been fixed and he's on his way to get this guy. And if it were me, I would have made a big deal about fixing it. I mean, the whole point would get to this point, he fixed it, and have a big deal, shove off into the, but he almost purposely avoids those dramatic moments. There's drama here, but the moments you and I would think were important, he just kind of overlooked. All of a sudden he skips that. Wait a minute, where are we? Are we still here? No, we've gone somewhere else. And you have to think about that. His stories before and after were more objective, more descriptive, and more clear. The Heart of Darkness is, and these are great words to describe it, interior, like it's psychological, analytic, psychological, and symbolic. Is this an allegory? I don't think we could call it that, but it's certainly, I'll tell you something else it doesn't say. Think about Dante's Inferno. A lot of great books have Dante's Inferno in mind when they write, and in this case, this is travel to the heart of darkness. Isn't that what Dante did? He traveled to the heart of darkness. He didn't call it that. He called it the pit of hell. But they both involve journeys and increasing sin or increasing evil. It says first and only symbolic work of Conrad. So there are symbols galore. And it's a badge of personal impressions. I tried to make that point with Red Badge of Courage, is that you get all these vignettes, these little pictures of events, and you get that here. For instance, one that just popped in my mind, he goes to Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, to get a job, the main character does, with a company, and that would allow him to skipper a steamboat in Africa. And he calls the city he compares it to the white sepulchral city. It's a reference to Jesus when he talked about the Pharisees were like whitewashed tombs, you know, white and pretty on the outside, but filled with dead man's bones on the inside. And that picture of a city that was pretty on the outside but covered up a lot of evil strikes me. I mean, that's the kind of symbolism he uses. He said Kurtz, and he's the main character. Well, there are 2 main characters. Joseph Conrad is in the book, but he's not the main character. He's a listener. All right, it is a frame story, so you got to keep that in mind. The entire story is a story within a story, and the story is being told aboard a yacht which is anchored in the Thames River as they wait for the tide to change. The Thames runs, you know, into the English Channel or whatever that. What else is that called? Not the North Sea. What is that sea? Like the English Channel is that more narrow part, but anyway, it runs that way, east and south. And so they're waiting for the tide, because the water, as the tide changes, the water, they're so close to the ocean that it affects the movement of that river. So they're sitting there waiting for the tide to change so they can go out the Thames, down the Thames, and into the ocean. They never leave. They stay there the entire story. And yet the story that's being told takes place in Africa. So that's the frame. You've got Conrad on the outside, and you got Marlowe on the inside telling the story, which we know is the Heart of Darkness. Marlowe is also in Lord Jim. which I'd forgotten it. That's when I read AP Lit. And the story has themes of imperialism, colonialism, and the reason I prefer to have waited, because it will more parallel what you're doing in Ms. Roberts' class when she talks about those things. But that's really the context of this story is in the 1890s, early 1900s. The Europeans were gobbling up places all over the world, including Africa, and they just kind of parceled out Africa to the Belgians in the Congo, the British in Egypt, the Germans are there, the Dutch have South Africa, Dutch and the British. You got the French. You ever seen Casablanca? Ever seen that movie? Ever heard of it? Good. That's an education. You've seen good movies. Anyway, that takes place in French North Africa. So all the European countries prior to World War II were dividing Africa into different parts so that they could exploit it in various ways. And she will teach you about the different kinds of colonialism, the different methods used. I think about China. Did you know that the Opium Wars, as I understand it, during the same time, the British, they're the good guys, right? The British actually tried to flood, as I understand it, China with opium so people could get addicted, so they would buy the stuff. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that was going on in this period. And it's the influences Impressionism, a private view of reality. So his view, one person's view of reality, where Impressionism comes in. All right, so here's the other thing, beside those themes of colonialism and imperialism, you have he uses contrast all over the place. The wilderness versus civilization. The Thames and the Congo, two rivers. There's certainly light and dark. You see that in the first several pages. White and black. The white Europeans, the black Africans. Kurtz and Marlowe. It's almost like one is the alter ego of the other. Kurtz is one of the most famous characters in all modern literature, and fascinating. Then you have different, particularly the Europeans and the Africans, but at the beginning you're reminded of the Romans. So the contrast and similarities between all these are among all these. And then there are two kinds of devils we learn. You can be a flabby devil, which you just don't care about anything. Life doesn't mean anything. You just let everything go. Or you can be the other kind, a passionate devil, where you consciously go out and hurt people. Both are shown in this book. They're flabby devils that just allow the evil to continue without confronting it. And did you know, I think you can make an argument that it's a sin to be, it's a sin not to do your work well. Laziness could be a sin, could be considered a sin, because you're not doing anything, and that's the problem. If you have responsibilities, that could be just as big of a sin as if you consciously trying to hurt people. What would you have?
You think it would be just as big of a sin?
I think just as big.
I don't know. That's a good point.
I think you could call it a sin, but I think like hurting somebody and then just not doing something that only affects you is different.
That makes sense.
That's how Dr. Calvert.
Yeah.
In ancient Rome, slothfulness,
I can't hear you.
slothfulness was a capital punishment.
One more time.
Slothfulness was a capital punishment.
Very interesting.
Very
Anybody ever see the last Seinfeld episode?
But don't they talk about it?
If you're not are you a Seinfeld?
I love Seinfeld.
Do you know what we're even talking about when you say Seinfeld? Hang on. The whole episode, it's a two-part episode, is about the fact they witness an accident,
I decided.
and they don't do anything about it. And they're actually arrested, for not doing anything about it. Because that's the kind of people they are. The show makes fun of the kind of people that, like Jerry Seinfeld and all those
Show
different.
about nothing.
What?
Said it's a show about nothing.
Yeah, it's a show about nothing, and it's sort of sort of a satire, but they actually have these Good Samaritan laws that if you don't act in a particular situation, you don't do anything, you could be guilty of something. So, anyway, that raises this issue because, I mean, so your opinion, which you think is worse, but it does show you both sides of that issue. I've never known, I can't even remember who it is, but I had a student several years ago, a long time ago. The Hollow Man was his favorite poet. It always surprises me what, like, really? I would never have thought anybody would say that. We will study that poet. It's by T.S. Eliot, Dr. Betzel, which, have you ever had Dr. Betzel? Do you have him this year?
We had him last year, for like half the year.
All right, well, you didn't do the literature with him, did you?
No.
Okay, so he's actually, wouldn't hesitate to say he's an expert on T.S. Eliot. He did his dissertation on him. You will do, as a senior, you will do some T.S. Eliot, I have no doubt. Any of you ever heard of the movie Apocalypse Now? Have you seen it?
And it's been a while.
I've never seen it. It's pretty violent, Vietnam War movie. Have you seen it? How would you describe it?
Very violent.
Yeah. Anyway, one of the Sheen brothers, Sheen, the Charlie Sheen family, I don't know which Sheen this is, Martin Sheen, is one of the main characters. He actually plays the Marlowe character. I don't remember who plays the Kurtz character, but if you want to watch it, I've never seen it, and I wouldn't show it, but you're welcome to try that out. And I like what Conrad had on his tombstone. This is from Edmund Spenser, I guess, the Fairy Queen. Sleep after toil, port after stormy seas, ease after war, death after life does greatly please. I just thought that was, he was half his life spent as a sailor. I think that's it. But, so, don't know if maybe I'm going to have time to give it to you today. That's a shame because actually I think I'm going to go down and get it because I want you to start reading it. I don't want to waste. So if you finish this, I'll go down. There's small books I think I can handle.
Okay, that's unnecessary. There. Bro, really? Okay, I'll teach you this class now.
Do it. Get on the camera.
He's out.
He is currently downstairs. This is Mr. Jenkins. How may I help you?
I don't know, I lived on the first day of school, this is what, I'll go into the phone.
Oh, they're ringing for you. Say hey. Hello, this is Mr. Voorhees. How may I help you?
This is Mr. Voorhees, how can I help you?
Oh.
Oh,
Can I help you?
David needs to go down to the office.
This is Mr. Voorhees, how can I help?
Dave, you need to go down to the office. They actually said your name. They said David Sheridan needs to be sent down to the office.
Yes.
Oh,
That's so
Very
bad.
good. Turn in.
Oh, thanks for saying it was mine.
this looks like a
I love it.
I mean, you live in walking to Spanish.
Oh, it's such
Oh, the timing on that.
All right, let me give you a.
I love how you guys are more suspicious than me having all your heads down.
It's a little over 100 pages long, you've got 105.
I just wanted to laugh so hard.
I'm gonna do it. Let's see. Somebody has to answer.
I also did not know.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to read, I'm gonna ask you to read the page seven.
Secondhand embarrassment.
Oh, that's right.
It's not easy reading, that's not as much as we normally do. But I'm gonna ask you to read the page, hang on, read page 70 for Friday, and we'll see you then.
Oh, wait.
It's too thorough.
You can't get short. I just felt like bad secondhand.
I'm gonna love